Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant. Today, we finally deal with one of the most important factions in the entire Grimdark. One that holds immutable, one of the rarest qualities, the purest, in all of the setting. For in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Hence valor, strength, power, and commitment are in plentiful supply. Make no mistake, they are not rare. But there is one thing that is. Often it is mistaken, being the fear of the masses to their masters, but in its purest form, it is rare. For the word is not zealotry, faith, power, defiance, or ability. The word is loyalty. And so, for your amusement and fascination, I now, with friends, present to you an in-depth look at those mighty sons of a mightier sire. Of course, I speak of Rogal Dorn, the mastermind of the Last Wall, and his sons, the Emperor's cold wrath made manifest, his Imperial Fists. The Poka Aurora system was named after its primary world, Poka Aurora, in the language of the Administratum, High Gothic. In the common parlance of the people, Low Gothic, it meant beautiful dawn. And it was once a truly halcyon world. It was, before that terrible time known as the Horus Heresy. Despite it being over 10,000 years since those dark days, the world would never be the same. It had been rich and verdant, producing foods and mineral resources for light years around. During the heresy, strip mining began, for the resources of Poka Aurora were rare in the extreme, and were desperately needed by the Loyalists for their war efforts. Tens of thousands of men and women died under the constant pace and lack of safety practices. The resources were needed immediately. But when the war was over, and the great adversary, Horus Lupercal, was finally defeated, the Imperium was on its knees. So they did not stop their strip mining practices. They did not show restraint. And Aurora Pulchra was transformed into a barren, lifeless place. So congested was the very air, filled with the particles resultant from the blasting and strip mining of the world. It took nearly 300 years of constant abuse of the planet for it to be finally drained of the last of its mineral resources. And almost overnight, the heavy loaders and ore extractors fell silent. The roaring fires of smelting and processing, the crisscrossing of haulers across the upper atmosphere, the constant flow of resources into the world to maintain its efficiency, all of it ended. And the Imperium simply upped sticks and left the populace of the world bereft of purpose, bereft of resources, bereft of any way to maintain their entire society, so reliant on the payment for their rare minerals were they. And Poka Aurora dwindled overnight. The catastrophic impact on its fabric was too much. Food and water became prized beyond compare, and civil order broke down practically overnight. For hundreds of years the world went into a state of semi-rebellion as one revolution after another made the gutters run with blood. But the Administratum did not care. Poka Aurora was drained of any of its use, so it was simply ignored. And like so many other worlds, it regressed again and again, as the constant conflict debased the world and its scant remaining inhabitants. But that was a long time ago. Over the subsequent ages of the Imperium, slowly but surely, Poka Aurora recovered its natural beauty. Its habitat began to resurge. It began to breathe again. And in that new beautiful dawn, the populace began to thrive again, began to hope again. They scrimped and saved, harvesting and trading the best of their wares, and slowly gained funds to procure plants, then wildlife from other worlds. And as the entire community pulled together, they rebuilt their world anew. Forests grew, and the tide turned. Crops began to sprout, and the skies and seas were once more filled with living things. And over the next 10,000 years or more, Poka Aurora began to regain the interest of the Administratum and the greater Imperium again. The mineral resources of the world were long gone, but there was something that could be gained from the world again. It had value. In its people. Its raw resource was a very compliant, hardy and energetic people, fitter and more easily applied than most in the region. The Administratum took their planetary tithe in head count. Some attempt had been made to raise regiments due to the hardness of the people, but this was soon declared a failed experiment. Despite the early periods of civil war after the Imperium pulled out, the people of this world were not martial at all. Sturdy survivors, yes. Warriors, no. But they were workers par excellence. No shift too long, no task too arduous. They practically shone when given a task they could perform as a community, as a team. For the people of Poka Aurora never once blamed the Imperium for its circumstances. They saw it as a test from the Emperor. Could they become more than they were? Was the ideology that had gotten them through, had made them work together to rebuild their world, instead of drenching its barren wastes in further blood, as so many other worlds had done. And the people of beautiful Dorn were quietly proud, never smug or conceited, but they had a pride that could never be eroded, never be taken from them, even when the work they were required to do was almost insurmountable, and their friends died around them of sheer exhaustion. They seemed to pull together instead of splitting apart, and they were reasonable. They would make suggestions, never make demands. And it was the wise administrator or governor who heeded their quiet words, for it would inevitably lead to an explosion in productivity. They were one of the quiet and unlauded groups of the Imperium that are never mentioned, never heralded, never thanked. Yet without them and people like them, there would be no Imperium. Despite never being valued, they became invaluable. But when the final moment, the moment of truth came, the Administratum looked upon the beleaguered worlds that were assailed by the forces of chaos, xenos, traitors, and scum, and they put all of the worlds in their locus of control on the scales and weighed them. They could not defend them all. And so it was that when the fleet of traitor Astartes cut a swathe of destruction across the sector, it was to Poka Aurora that the very best the Imperium had to offer was sent to defend it, sent to protect its most valuable resource, its people, but also sent to end the scourge of the fallen chapter that had carved its way across the stars. And thus it was that the traitors were only weeks ahead of the arrival of the counter from the Imperium. The warband of the Bloody Sickle, worshippers of Chaos Undivided, arrived in high orbit, and within scant hours the majority of their forces were already assaulting the Northern Hemisphere across its entire front. Working from the outskirts in, they culled and killed, maimed and murdered their way from one hive to the next, little knowing that the hives were largely deserted compared to the small settlements dotted across the entirety of Poka Aurora. Its populace had largely abandoned the hives when the world had begun to blossom again. No longer required to hide behind shields and unfeeling and uncaring steel, their diaspora across the face of the globe was a thing of beauty to them. But the Chaos Warriors were Space Marines. They were perfectly adept at wars, battles and victory. The warband had only recently turned to the worship of the Dark Powers, and had little experience in mass exterminations of a human populace. Thus did they take time to catch on, and it took them weeks to adapt. But adapt they did. The Dark Apostles now converted many of the hardy but simple people into cultists of the worst order. It took time, it took effort, but it was done. And as they drenched the Northern Hemisphere in blood, it was as often the makeshift weapons or even hands or sharpened teeth of the cultist converts that performed as much slaughter as the Space Marines themselves. Numbers. They swarmed around the procession of the traitor Marines as they wended their way towards the one land crossing from the north to the south. Only one emplacement was in their way. It was no hive. It was merely an old citadel from the days of the civil wars. Mostly broken down, hardly populated, with only 12,000 souls as residents. The fishing was good in the waters nearby, or there certainly would not be that many now. For it was an isolated and windswept region, where the forests had retaken the land, and only small pathways now led to any other area. Few ventured from north to south, or vice versa, so it was even more insular, parochial, and backward than most places on the world of Poka Aurora. When their skies were filled with attack and transport vessels of the Imperium, the people huddled behind their ancient walls, knowing not if they would be saved. Of these were the forces of chaos in disguise, luring them out to then wipe them out. But as the vehicles got closer, their hue clear, their heraldry visible, it was with a mighty celibate outpouring of relief that the people then took to the walls and entryways of their old fortress and cheered. For of all of them, of all of the forces the Emperor commands, surely, for the people of Poka Aurora, these warriors were the most blessed sight to behold. As the landers poured out their cargoes with an efficiency that bewildered the local populace, a delegation thereof approached the landing site. Already preparing their positions, the indigenous people were stopped by the huge armoured warriors of the picket. Towering over them, in armour covered in yellow, the Space Marines never took off their helmets and only permitted one person to pass. Just one. Hence it was that Ealdorman Hammurabi trudged through the mass of moving armour, marines, landers and equipment. With each step he seemed to shrivel. He felt so overawed by it all. Everything was so big, so heavy, so directed, so precise. Nothing out of order, except for he. And thus he dodged out of the way of multiple heavy vehicles that had no weapons he could discern. What on earth were they doing with such industrial building equipment? A question he would pose when he got to the command center, he told himself. As he approached the center of the storm, he saw 3 men standing together, directing others as they approached. Also, 2 of them had their helmets off. For some reason, he knew that this was a sign of their rank, their status. They looked striking enough, noble enough, terrifying enough, if he was honest. 2 of them were speaking when he arrived.
Take your men and deploy as outlined. You know what to do, Lieutenant Artorius. I'll see you in a few days. Don't be late when we give the signal.
Have I ever let you down?
No. Let's not make this the first time, eh?
Of course, Captain Chiros. It'll be hard to sit back and cool our heels while you're having all the action, but we'll be ready. See you in a few days.
He was later to discern that it was the captain in charge and the lieutenant of the vanguard forces. Not that he knew what that meant. He did not need to. The Emperor had sent his warriors to protect them. And such warriors! As the lieutenant swiftly pivoted on his heel and strode off purposefully, the Ealdorman witnessed a large segment of the force break off. They jumped in levitating vehicles that could not be anything other than tanks and armoured transports by the looks of them. Within only minutes, they were already a distant memory, disappearing into the dense foliage of the surrounding woods. They simply disappeared. The Ealdorman stood for a few minutes more, perplexed at the fact the leaders had simply turned from him and continued their discussions, regularly pointing to distant areas of the scenery. He was not sure if he should interrupt, but after 5 more minutes of waiting, with his palms so sweaty that they could barely keep a grip on his staff of office, one he presently desperately needed, as his knees seemed to have lost their certainty amidst these titanic men and vehicles of war. Hence the Ealdorman slowly processed forwards, clearing his throat theatrically, to make absolutely certain that both of these warriors knew of his intention to approach. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, that 10 paces forward, to a respectful distance from the giants, as they slowly turned to him. The leader, the Elderman was sure by his stance, his bearing, his panoply of war, his directing others. He took 2 huge strides towards the Elderman, closing the distance between them in an instant. The Elderman visibly shrunk as the shadow from the man engulfed him entirely. He blotted out the very skies as far as the Elderman could see. It was how he felt, at least. But, to his credit, the Elderman then produced his most elegant and deepest bow before rising and addressing the warriors before him.
"Hail, mighty sons of Dorn! We prayed constantly to the Emperor for deliverance, but never, in our wildest dreams, did we think that it would be the Imperial Fists he would deign to send to us as our defenders."
The Emperor protects. Why are you here?
I live here. I am the Elderman of this place, O mighty lord of the Emperor's own angels of death.
No! Why are you here, in front of me?
As the Elderman, I have questions about the defenses, about our enemy, what we can do to help. Why your men are building and working in their full armor.
Well met, Eldermen. Our enemy are traitorous Astartes. We will be setting up concentric ring positions with rockreed and other quickly created and hardened defenses. You can help us by staying out of harm's way in the main building, both now and especially during the combat. My men fortify in their armor because we do not know where the enemy is or when they will get here.
But we have reports that state they are a week away from us.
And you are 100% on that, are you? Certain. Zero margin for error? No?
No.
You may wish to risk the lives of your men with chance or hearsay, but you will forgive me if I do not!
I meant no offense, Lord. I meant no offense.
I am here to make your home defensible, then to man those defenses. We have little time, so frame all of your questions so that a yes or no answer will suffice. You have 2 minutes of my time. Ask now.
We have been asked to stay in the Grand Hall. Do we need to stay in there all this time?
Yes.
But we are willing to help. Is there nothing we can do?
No.
Oh. Would our presence really hamper you more than assist?
Yes.
Oh. Can we at least make some meals to help your brave warriors?
No. Your time is up. If you have further questions, my lieutenant will be available for 2 minutes at this time tomorrow. Good day.
Oh.
The Elderman then turned and began his trudge back to the waiting city. If he was honest, although the person imparting the answers terrified him more than even the threat of the invaders, he was relieved. He knew his people would not hold against the tides of terror that were about to dash against the warriors around him, and he was thankful that they were here. As soon as he got more than 20 yards away, the captain turned to his most trusted subordinate.
Has he gone?
Yes. I can understand his questions, as points. He is just a leader of his people. Could you not have spared him more time?
Excellent. You will enjoy your morning meetings then, but control them. Alas, you will find that with these types, the more time you give them, the more they will fill it up and take it away from you. Be careful in being too accessible. You may well end regretting it.
And with that, the work began. The next 6 days were a whirlwind, and the people looked on in awe. In the first day, armoured men wearing blue and carrying staves walked every inch of the old fortress, stopping regularly and putting their hands on segments of walls, buttresses and crenellations. The same men then went down to the areas outside of the fortress and began to walk around their edge, to clap their hands together and then slowly pull them apart. When they did this, huge chasms appeared in the ground, in a perfect set of 3 concentric circles, all around 20 feet deep and thrice as long. When this was done, huge construction vehicles began to drop in raw materials and chemicals, making a thick grey sludge. As more rock was gained with each passing hour, the blasting that occurred at the far end of the outcrop of hills that led to the back of the old fortress were almost constantly lit by explosions, and the entire valley echoed with those thunderous reports. Over the next days, the grey sludge was hardened again, and each load of blocks was then lifted by vehicles and directed into position by marines of varying armours, but all in the dazzling yellow of the Imperial Fists. Every single last marine worked tirelessly, indefatigably. They worked until the very last moment. And when they were done, only 6 days later, the old and dilapidated fort, the hard point between the continents, previously known as Conqueror's Ruin, had become a veritable Bastille. The only place that had not received a total transformation was the interior of the main sanctum of the Emperor, his holy church. All else was altered, made ready for the clangor of war. It was on day 5 that the Imperial Fists had blown a local river bank, diverting the waters into channels made by the blue-clad marines, their librarians with their geokinesis abilities, and the 3 rings of moats were filled with water to slow the oncoming enemy. Walls 60 feet in height, 20 or more thick in its weakest places, a labyrinth of tunnels behind the walls, every corridor or intersection point dotted with traps, murder holes, auto-sentries, hidden fire points, and blatant foe ones, and much, much more. On the skies on the horizon darkened with the smoke of a world burning, it was from deep within a veritable fortress that the Imperial Fists and their charges looked on. And so, the traitor Astartes had been burning their way toward the intersection, for ease of movement of the many tens of thousands of their newly converted scum. It took them 2 more days before their low-flying aircraft had dropped enough debased promethium on the woodlands between their main thrust and the waiting lines of Imperial Fists. And another day for it then to cool enough for the onward rush of the horde. But onwards they did rush. And so it was that on the 3rd day after they were initially spotted, that the forces of the traitors finally crested the horizon. And they did so in their tens of thousands. Evil had arrived at Conqueror's Ruin. Dear gentle listener, this is a slightly different style of video, and I shall outline its remit. I have constructed a narrative that should show, not tell, how the Imperial Fists act on the battlefield, and what sort of roles in which they excel. And we shall hear the most current information concerning their present position, their state of play and the setting, so to put it, how they are right now. If you wish to know more of their history, and the mighty sire of this legion and chapter, their progenitor, their Primarch, then I refer you to my trilogy of videos concerning the Praetorian of Terror, the indefatigable clenched fist of the Emperor, Rogal Dorn. Earlier videos, but I am told they are still some of my best work to date. And from there, I intend to perform more in-depth looks at many of the chapters and legions, covering more of their history from the end of the Horus Heresy and the Scouring up to the present day of the 41st millennium and beyond. But details are changing in small shifts and large leaps in that period, as Black Library release more books covering the ages. So, all good things come to he who waits, eh? I shall get to them when I am happy I can give a good account of myself, for your entertainment and guidance. Returning to this video in specific, I will be interspersing tracts of lore with the continuation of my little tale, but always know it is a fan fiction only. An attempt to make the protagonists of the day more relatable, to see what they do and how they do it from my own bigger perspective. And so, let us continue on our journey of discovery into the events of my siege of Conqueror's Ruin, while we hear of this, one of the most important factions at the command of the Emperor, his Imperial Fists. The Imperium's Shield. The Imperial Fists were the most stalwart of the Space Marine legions during the Horus Heresy, and their legend has grown with every passing century. Such heroism has always claimed its blood price, but this is a burden the Imperial Fists bear with fortitude, for they know that their Primarch, Rogal Dorn, would have expected nothing less. Such is the Primarch's inheritance, bluntness and hard-headedness, leavened by idealism and a passion for the dream of an Imperium restored. Like so many of his brother Primarchs, Rogal Dorn had seized a warrior's destiny long before his reunification with the Emperor. Adopted into the ruling families of the VIIth system, his talent for discipline and order had expanded that star-flung dominion's boundaries further than anyone had before. In Dorn resided the perfect balance of humours. He had a mind appreciative not just of metal and machinery, but also the flesh and blood that must wield such tools in matters of war. Furthermore, Dorn was possessed of a stalwart idealism that melded perfectly with the Emperor's Great Crusade and equipped him well for leadership of the fledgling 7th Legion. The Imperial Fists soon became the Emperor's Praetorians, a duty they discharged with honour on worlds beyond count as the Great Crusade wore on. From the first, they proved masters of the bloody work of siegecraft. Under their Primarch's guidance, they rose and broke fortifications like no other force, safeguarding the nascent Imperium with an ever-expanding curtain wall of fortress worlds and deep space bastions. To Dorn's calculating eye, the Imperium was a fortress and terror its central citadel, and mankind's far-flung worlds were more than dominions to be reclaimed. They were vital ramparts in a growing whole that Dorn envisioned as the Bastion Imperialis, and owed service as readily as they were owed protection in return. As a result, few felt the betrayal of the Horus heresy more deeply than the brooding Rogal Dorn. Each word that plunged into rebellion cracked the foundation of the immortal fortress he had laboured to build. Though the Imperial Fist Legion is long gone, its battle brothers divided amongst the Black Templars, Crimson Fists, and other successor chapters during the Second Founding. The chapter that bears its name maintains the duties and traditions of old. At the end of the scouring, the Imperial Fists observed what they saw as the rest of the Imperium giving up on the Emperor's dream of united mankind, and swore to continue the fight, alone if necessary. It is said that the Great Crusade never ended for them. Refusing to focus their efforts on simply preserving what remains of the Imperium, the Sons of Dorn have ever campaigned across the galaxy, prosecuting war against the enemies of mankind. The Pride of Dorn. It is held that the Imperial Fist's finest hour came during the siege of the Emperor's Palace, the fortifying of which Rogal Dorn had been pivotal in carrying out. In truth, however, the Imperial Fists have many times been vital to the Imperium's survival, though it is a point of honour amongst the Sons of Dorn that such victories are spoken of only out of need. Whilst the Sons of Dorn have never been afflicted with the same clandestine secrecy endemic to the Dark Angels, neither do they approve of the braggatism that permeates chapters such as the Space Wolves. As individuals and as a chapter, the Imperial Fists seek purpose in the performance of great deeds, not the recounting of them. Thus, those who first encounter the Sons of Dorn often perceive them as sombre and cheerless warriors. Those that know them better, not least their rivals in so many ways, the Ultramarines, recognize the passion that all Imperial Fists keep under tight rein. This continual mortification is necessary, for pride has ever been the Imperial Fist's greatest weakness. Pride is a powerful force. It can spur a warrior on to great deeds, even as those around lose all hope. It dredges fresh strength from the most debilitating of fugues, and brings forth the flame of victory from the embers of despair. Yet pride is a sword that cuts both ways, as a chapter has often found to its cost. Phalanx's Librarius contains many tales of the Imperial Fists who have died needlessly, driven to fight on when chapter and Imperium would have been better served by warriors shamed but still alive. Squads, companies, and still greater proportions of the chapter's strength have been known to perish in this manner. Such losses would have destroyed the Imperial Fists, but for a recruit reserve far deeper than that of most chapters, coupled with a stubborn determination that has ever seen the chapter cling to survival more than once. It is a source of pride that so long as one battle brother yet stands to hold the chapter banner high, the Sons of Dorn will never truly be defeated. Unlike many other chapters, the Primaris do not offer the Imperial Fist salvation. but rather an influx of ready warriors that took a flourishing chapter to unprecedented heights of martial achievement. In an attempt to counteract the chapter's destructive pride, the chaplains of the Imperial Fists preach credos intended to instill a more measured approach to war. Any defeat can be reversed, the chapter's neophytes are taught, provided that there are warriors yet alive to see the matter done. But these teachings are just balms to soothe the incurable. Stubbornness is as much a part of the Imperial Fist as their Primarch's gene seed, and it is a rare battle brother who can resist its lure forever. For an Imperial Fist, every battle is a test of will. Those who master their pride are able to embrace the strength it offers, but also have the wisdom to know when it tempts foolishness. Such Space Marines become heroes, but they can never truly escape the hubris of their blood. In the era Indomitus, the mission of the Imperial Fists grinds on. Dorn's designs for the Bastion Imperialis, abandoned in the wake of Horus's betrayal, have been taken up once more. Priority is given to securing the Imperium Sanctus. Those domains not sundered from Terra by the Great Rift are also adamant that the Imperium Nihilis must not be abandoned. Scattered worlds that have not known the Emperor's rule in centuries are bound by fresh bonds of protection and fealty. Tyrants and warlords who deem themselves safe behind towering walls and adamantium redoubts are taught new and brutal lessons, that there is no fortress the Imperial Fist cannot cast down, no shelter to be found amongst the rubble, no weakness too small for the sons of Dorn to exploit, and nowhere to hide from their vengeance. Guilliman's launch of the Indomitus Crusade is seen by many of the Imperial Fists as proof of a truth long held, that the galaxy would be a very different place had Dorn and not Guilliman crafted the fate of the broken Imperium in the heresy's wake. Though Dorn eventually embraced the principles of the Codex Astartes and broke his beloved legion into lesser chapters, he did so not out of desire, but out of necessity. That the Codex still holds sway over the Imperial Fists some 10,000 years on is testament to their characteristic refusal to abandon any challenge once embraced. To the Imperial Fists, the tempered aggression of the Indomitus Crusade feels more like the strategy of vanished Dorn than reboot Guilliman. They are not the only ones to believe that the crusading Lord Commander of today is in many ways a different man to the Primarch of yore. But unlike most who share this perspective, the Sons of Dorn wholeheartedly approve of the change, taking it as confirmation that Dorn's precepts are in ascendance once more. Whoever issues the orders. The forces of evil crested the horizon, and their advance was steady but swift. Terrifyingly swift. The forward ranks practically pushing each other aside, scrambling across and against each other to be the first to the walls. It was not the main force, oh no. That was made up of rigorously trained and still hardened warriors who knew the benefit of discipline. Sometimes only out of fear of what their superiors in the chain of command would do to them, but it was discipline no matter the reason for it. As the carnival-like swarm of chaos piled forever onwards, most of its number was held around the main thrust, dark apostles screaming vileness and degradations into the heavens, but keeping the majority of their rabble in check, holding them back. The main force of Marines, their land raiders, whirlwinds, rhinos, and other vehicles all approached to only a safe distance, out of the usual range for defensive fire before coming to a stop. Hence it was only the most frothingly deranged that made their headlong dash towards the fortress, a small fraction of the main force, but an important beginning to the siege. And it was in this first contact that much of the pace and tempo of the battle would be set. For siege warfare was as much a matter of morale and momentum as it was of method. Hence were the Imperial Fists out on the walls in great numbers, the dawn light reflecting off their yellow armor, making them seem like spectral statues of light, instead of the barely contained Emperor's wrath that made not one move, not one fidget, scuff, or stretch. They simply looked down from the battlements, from their fire points, utterly motionless, and with a steely determination that would have broken all but the most insane before ere they approached those fell walls. But these insane, twisted hordes just gurgled and screamed as they charged headlong towards the lines.
Alright, you know the drill. We wipe this probing assault off the field in short order. And gentlemen, if one of those scums hit the moats, there will be unpleasantly candid write-ups involved. Let's get this done for Rogal Dorn.
Squad's ready. We can't have these whippersnappers outdo us here, brothers. I expect your best. I expect it to be better than theirs.
Thousands of cultists ran forward, but when they reached a certain point, they began to explode. At first, it was only the pinpoint accuracy of the slightly longer ranged and more heavily impacting rounds of the bolt rifles of the intercessors that found their mark. But as the screaming crowd moved forward, the hail fire increased as the bolters of the Astartes of the tactical squads matched the rate of fire of the rifles. But be it rifles or bolters, the fire was unerringly accurate. Each bolt hit first time every time. Some were so accurately placed as to plough through one target and explode in another, sometimes multiple. The rain of fire was lightning quick, and each of the Imperial Fists worked almost mechanically, but at a pace beyond the ability of any standard human. They fired and put the next target in their sights and fired again without pause, without hesitation. New magazines were slapped into the bolt weapons almost in unison across the lines, as a blizzard of bolt shots kept flying unrelentingly. And the result was foregone. As the firing from the walls finally ended, there was a good 20 yards remaining before the beginning of the carpet of dead and the furthest edge of the outer moats. Many still twitched and moaned, but none actually moved forwards. None.
First wave broken. No contact made with Objective 1, as instructed. Understood. Men, initiate goading patterns 2 through 6. Slander at will.
With that, the stoic and disciplined Astartes of the Imperial Fists then began to use tried and tested taunts and signals designed by body language and psychology experts. It was utterly professional and utterly without mirth or without pride. They were siege experts. They knew the drill better perhaps than any in the galaxy, and the riling of the enemy, the hit to his morale, would be all too important. Of course, the optimal result would have been an immediate reaction from the hordes, another mad dash at their guns and fortifications before they could be organized or ordered, and it would lead to an almost exact repeat of the last 10 minutes of action. Alas, despite it working to inflame the passions of the hordes, their dark apostles screeched at them and halted them, executing any who broke ranks to move forward. The first engagement had gone as planned, the enemy bloodied and broken. Forced to consider that they could not just roll over the walls at a whim, it began the puncturing of the confidence of the enemy. It shook their cultists more than it ever would the Astartes in their center, but they would have their own secret fears, their own confidence crusher. For these Astartes, these traitors, they knew the reputation of the Imperial Fists, and, being a chapter of only a few centuries of existence, could not help themselves. There was more than just a little awe in play. Awe of the loyalists that would slowly eat at the traitors as things dragged on. They would need a swift victory, or would have none at all. They would have days, not weeks or months. For the traitors, it would have to be done in days. And so it was time for the serious business of a siege. And with the clock against the traitors, it would be a bloody one. The rest of that day witnessed the filling of the air with shot and explosives, as both sides went about attempting to pound the other into submission. The siege forces were difficult to spot, due to their artillery being in the rear of their forces. But somehow the Imperial Fists kept hitting them, no matter how often they repositioned. Despite this, the fire from the sieging army was not to be underestimated, and soon enough huge rents began to appear all over the fortress. None in the most secure area, the most reinforced, being the walls, but structures behind were soon toppling over. But this again was as planned. The Imperial Fists had designed their defenses not only with optimal lines of ingress to control, but also with the mentality of their aggressor in mind. They purposefully left up fragile spires and towers, which made for intensely satisfying sights when the sieging army's shot hit them. Alas, for all of the spectacle, the bombardment did nothing to the structures the Imperial Fists had made, nor the central building where all of the civilians were being held. It looked good, but achieved absolutely zero. But while it was looking good, it permitted the hidden or hard-bunkered batteries of the Imperial Fists to lay waste to the aggressor's artillery. The accuracy was simply unerring. The traitors soon realized that they could not win in a slugging match, not against the Imperial Fists. So after only one day, and most of one night, the Chaos Forces prepared their next waves for a dawn assault. Before the sun's red light had properly touched the clouds, the hordes moved again. But not all of them. The traitors may have turned to evil, but they had not lost all of their wits. The second wave charged headlong towards the moat and walls at the speed of the previous day, but they were doubled in their number, if not more. As they charged, some elements of the traitors snuck into range and fired directly at the walls, in an attempt to cut down as many Imperial Fists as they could. But they were at long range, and were not sons of Rogal Dorn. They took scalps, but very few.
All right, change of tack. Volley fire, slow them. Then on my word we will shift to firing at their back ranks. We need them bundled up in and around the moat. Let's put the fear of the Emperor into these scum.
Marines, prepare for volley fire.
The cultists underwent the same deluge of controlled but lethally accurate fire as did their predecessors. But so many charged forward that they simply trampled the fallen into a bloody mess in their rage and wish to get to the walls. Yet the volley fire meant entire ranks of them went down all in one, and so it did indeed slow the onrushing beast. As each time the thunder of the perfectly aligned volley fire hit their ranks, they were pushed back upon themselves, and it slowed them, but did not stop them. And soon they were at the moats. 3 wide moats, each being at least 20 foot wide and deep. Then there was a small line of solid earth, like a thin island between the next moat. This meant that they would swim across, then pull themselves out of the water twice before getting even close to the last approach to the walls themselves. As they rose out of the water each time, they were picked off in lines, those being hit falling backwards on those following them. Soon the moats were so cluttered with the dead that it was nigh on impossible to move forward at any speed. Under the rigorous volleys of the Imperial Fists, they lost thousands, tens of thousands. But eventually, inexorably, they did begin to move forward by sheer weight of numbers.
Now, shift 3/4 fire on their back ranks. Maintain volley fire. Remaining quarter secure the grounds before our walls.
As the orders came down from the lieutenant to his sergeants, Gerhard Halsor, the senior tactical marine sergeant, made sure that their execution would be perfect.
All right, men, 2 to 5, continue firing down. I don't want one of those filth to put a pole on our outer walls. The rest of you, fire!
Now that those who milled on the other side of the moats were the targets, the cultists now frantically pushed forward even more, to be in the comparative safety of the waters. Attempting to push through floating masses of lifeless floating corpses as they were, bundled together in their thousands, they did not stand a chance when the next order was given. As the order came down, each of the Imperial Fists of the walls crouched into cover. Massive explosive charges inside the separated areas of landmass between the moats were then primed and detonated. Each landmass exploded upwards and outwards, covering the entire area in mud, shrapnel and fire. Those inside the water were smashed to oblivion by the force that was carried through it. Those above the moat were torn to shreds by the explosives or burnt to a crisp in the firestorm that erupted. Hundreds of tons of blood, mud and body parts was then deposited across the entire approach to the citadel. It literally rained cultist parts on those masses held back for subsequent waves. Only punctuated by the falling fragments of water, mud and bodies, the silence that issued from the chaos ranks was thunderous. No further attack happened that day. Chapter Organization. The Imperial Fists follow the logistic teachings of the Codex Astartes, the treatise written by Robert Guilliman to curtail the power of the old legions. Though the Imperial Fists were more hesitant than other legions to adopt the Codex, its wisdom came to be accepted and has helped to guide the Sons of Dorn to countless victories. Rogal Dorn rejected the teachings of the Codex Astartes at first. Embittered by the long wars of the Horus heresy and the merciless scouring that followed, he resented that Guilliman, who had fought only peripheral campaigns, while Dorn had stood in defense of the Emperor's palace itself, now dared to dictate matters of war and duty to the Imperial Fists. Dorn remained intractable, yielding only when another round of costly civil war seemed inevitable. Recognizing the ruinous path his pride had charted, he agreed to respect the principles of the Codex Astartes. Henceforth, the Imperial Fists would be a legion no longer, but one chapter amongst many. Where some chapters made modifications to the Codex Astartes to suit their individual needs, the Imperial Fists applied no such alterations. Once committed to Guilliman's precepts, they remained so without deviation. This was in no small part due to the fact that the most fiercely independent warriors of the Old Legion were excised into the Black Templars during the Second Founding. Those who remained were determined to master the tenets of the Codex Astartes and prove themselves the equals, or indeed the superiors, of the Ultramarines, even in the application of Guilliman's doctrines. As a result, aside from a few organizational quirks centered around accommodating phalanx into chapter hierarchy, the Imperial Fists are supremely Codex adherent. The first company consists of hardened warriors promoted from elsewhere in the chapter, and it is rightly famed for its precision Terminator assaults. It is uncommon for First Company Battle Brothers to take the field as a single formation, however. Instead, they usually deploy in small numbers to form the granite core of a strike force. The 2nd through 5th companies are the battle companies, carefully balanced to ensure a versatile response to any threat a war zone might present, each as a self-contained army in its own right, more than capable of bringing a campaign to a successful conclusion with a combination of overwhelming fire and furious close-quarters assault. While the Codex Astartes specifies the ratios of battle line, close support and fire support squads, it is considerably less precise concerning the specialized war gear these units should draw from the armory. Accordingly, Imperial Fists battle companies make prodigious use of Centurion warsuits and Gravis armor, greatly increasing each company's firepower. The 6th through 9th companies serve as the Imperial Fist reserve companies. These are primarily concerned with supporting the battle companies during deployments, either by providing additional punch to a particular discipline of warfare, or by filling gaps opened up by casualties. The reserve companies seldom shoulder the burden of a war zone without support from elsewhere in the chapter, but each is more than capable of doing so should need arise. Indeed, Chapter Command encourages such deployments when suitable, seeing them as excellent training opportunities. More than any chapter, the Imperial Fists considered battle distinct from drill only in the higher level of bloodshed anticipated. The 10th Company is a scout company, responsible not only for tutoring neophytes in the chapter's ways of war, but also for maintaining a corps of experienced vanguard squads. Vigorously trained by experienced veterans of the chapter, the neophytes who fight as scouts come to understand both their craft and their chapter. Those neophytes that make it this far have already survived the rigors of the initial selection process, but their true training has barely begun. The Initiate's Path. The Codex Astartes holds that a Battle Brother's journey should be a linear one, beginning in the Scout Company and passing in turn through the Reserve Companies to hone their skills. In most Codex chapters, this means that a Battle Brother who earns elevation from the Scout Company will progress in precisely that order, first battling the foe from a distance in the 9th Company, then eye to eye in the 8th Company, but finally harnessing both lessons in perfect balance in the reserve battle companies of the 7th and 6th. Only then are they deemed worthy of a posting to one of the chapter's battle companies. However, the Codex Astartes does not specify the precise order of transition, a fact of which the Imperial Fists take full advantage. Thus, most graduates of the Imperial Fists' 10th Company are elevated first to the 8th Company, where they are encouraged to purge themselves of any impetuousness through the fury of close assault, the better they might come to know the discipline expected of an Imperial Fist. Cleansed of distracting humours, they then progress to the 9th Company, where a more settled soul makes for a smoother grasp of the precision fire doctrines for which the chapter is renowned. From there, they pass through the reserve battle line companies as normal, but the focus on precision fire remains such that by the time a battle brother enters one of the chapter's battle companies, there are few warriors in the galaxy more accomplished in delivering death to those who shelter behind walls or within bunker complexes. Nearing noon, the Elderman, alone as usual, picked his way through the debris and trudged down corridors that were not there 10 days ago. He had but one sanctioned route, so did not get lost in the maze of fortifications. Also because he was flanked by 2 of the Marines of the squad that had been stationed within the main building, so as to protect the populace in the case of an unexpected teleportation or warp-spawned apparition in their midst. The Imperial Fists were well versed in the depths to which the worshippers of the dark gods of corruption would stoop. Thus the Elderman was sandwiched between the 2 walking tanks, Goliath to his aged David. But the Elderman was under no illusions that anything he could do would bring either of them low, no matter the circumstances. They escorted him up to the battlements for his daily 2-minute discourse with Lieutenant Nereus Markov.
Good morning, Elderman. Your questions?
Does it go well?
Yes.
Do you think I can tell my people it goes well?
Yes.
Where we live?
Emperor willing. It is looking likely.
Am I allowed to ask a question that has more than a one-word answer?
With me, yes, but be direct. I cannot increase your allocated time slot.
Why do the enemy send their men in waves, like shoals of fish? They outnumber you 100 to 1. It makes no sense. Why not charge with all at once?
Because they are trained warriors. Too many men on the field will constrain their actions, will confuse their orders, will obfuscate the real ebb and flow of the battle, will prevent them counting our guns, will lead to a mass rout and the end of the battle in one day if their men break. In one statement, it gives them control. Siege warfare is about patience and will. They are on a fixed schedule, as our battle barges chasing their small fleet around the system, so they do not have patience. They send in their chaff, their cultists, to tire out our men and waste our resources before sending in their main combat units. Now it is up to will. Who will tire first? Who will bleed first? Who will break first? Basically, who will be the last to fall? Your time is now up. Please retreat to the rear. Until tomorrow, Elderman.
Thank you for your time, Lieutenant, and all of your protection.
The 10th Company, the Eyes of Dorn. Firepower, taught Dorn, is worthless without eyes to guide it. Such is the mission of the 10th Company, to identify weaknesses in the enemy position and relay them to the chapter's fire support elements. The task is a dangerous one, often requiring warriors to advance far beyond the possibility of extraction. As such, it is the first true test of a neophyte's ability. Under the Codex Astartes, the 10th Company's dual function is to continuously provide training for those who would become full Space Marines, and to maintain 10 squads of experienced Vanguard Squad Marines. The precise manner by which this is handled varies from chapter to chapter, but in the Imperial Fists, the 10th Company are required to get close to the foe, sometimes closer than any other elements within a strike force. This is especially true of the Vanguard squads, whose more aggressive mission often brings them eye to eye with the enemy. While vulnerability can be discerned from afar, the Imperial Fist's precision warfare requires a closer, more personal examination, which often reveals weaknesses that a more distant analysis might miss. Thus the Eyes of Dorn employ their infiltration skills to observe and report. They overcome boundary patrols and sentries in bursts of merciless endeavour, slipping beneath the brittle shell of the enemy's perimeter to identify targets ripe for exploitation. Among the company's neophytes, only the most senior are trusted with heavy weapons for engaging the enemy at range. A battle brother of the Imperial Fists must earn the right to harness the armory's fury, and by their very nature, scouts are amongst the least tested of the chapter's warriors. When the chapter employs its armoured formations, the warriors of the 10th are expected to act as its outriders, racing forward upon bikes and land speeders to outpace the main advance. Once again, their primary task is to gather reconnaissance data in anticipation of the chapter's main assault. But it is a rare captain of the 10th Company who is content to limit his charges to such peripheral engagements. After all, a Space Marine is forged in war. Before rising from the ranks of the 10th Company, a neophyte will have an impressive tally of kills to his name, possessing a roster of battle honours that eclipses all but the most hardened veterans of the Astra Militarum, as well as a number of hard-won wounds demonstrating his courage. It is a testament to the incredible capabilities, standards and resolve of the Imperial Fists that such neophytes are among the chapter's least blooded and experienced. Legacy of Dorn. Each strain of the Astartes gene seed is different to the next, its post-human potential determined by failing sequences or the unquantifiable genetic variations of the Primarch to which its existence is owed. In some cases, notably the Space Wolves and Salamanders, these changes manifest as profound mutation, but other differences are less pronounced. In the case of the Imperial Fists, imperfections of gene seed have robbed them of the Suzanne membrane that allows a Space Marine to enter a state of suspended animation, nor do they possess a Betcher's gland, which enables an Astartes to spit poison at his foe. Naturally, the Imperial Fists mourn neither loss. Indeed, Chapter Luminary Rhetoricus was known to proclaim that such abilities are mere crutches for less accomplished warriors. The 9th Company. The Wardens. Imperial Fist recruits prove themselves as Astartes in the 10th Company, purge their recklessness in the 8th Company, and learn discipline worthy of Dorn during their time in the 6th and 7th. But it is in the 9th Company that a battle brother truly becomes an Imperial Fist. For it is here that he learns the chapter's central tenet, that firepower triumphs over all. To witness the 9th Company at their bloody work is to see war unfold as Dorn would have wished. It is to watch the creeping advance of fire support squads, their fury reinforced by formidable battle tanks and artillery as the chapter's revered dreadnoughts look on. The ground trembles and the sky screams as positions are scythed clear of foes, ramparts toppled, and bastions broken beneath an overwhelming torrent of fire. Though Dorn ever acknowledged that the prosecution of war was a council of many voices, the roar of big guns resonated in his soul even to the day of his disappearance. The Imperial Fist 9th Company serves as the chapter's senior reserve company, giving all battle brothers a vital grounding in the brutal arts of siege breaking. But the 9th also functions as an unofficial 5th battle company, more often forming a strike force's core than dividing its brothers across manifold battle zones. Even in an age where heretics and Xenos have grown bolder in the face of what they perceive as a weakened and vulnerable Imperium, campaigns untold are still effectively ended when Chapter Master Decian utters 4 simple words: send in the 9th. Captain Cahiron has commanded the 9th Company for more than 3 centuries, gaining a reputation as a disciplinarian that has come to eclipse all other officers in the chapter. Employment of the Pain Glove is more common within the 9th than in any other company, and Cahiron has at his disposal many other relics of chastisement besides, some of which even the chaplains refuse to endorse. Whatever his methods, under Cahiron's watch, the 9th Company has become more formidable than ever, and when the 9th rises in power, so too does the chapter as a whole, as the Wardens of today will fill the ranks of tomorrow's battle companies. In matters of traditional besieging, the Wardens prioritize combat from static positions, obliterating defences from fortified vantage points. Should such emplacements be absent, brothers of the 6th Company are often called in to oversee their construction. For this reason, the 6th and 9th commonly deploy together, the one to fashion a strong point from which the other can pummel the hapless foe. When it is not a sole fortress that must be humbled, but rather a sprawling domain, the 9th Company perforce fights on the move, requisitioning transports and battle tanks from the chapter's armory. Predators, Vindicators, Land Raiders, and Repulsor Executioners spearhead the advance, cleansing the field with merciless fire, while fire support squads prepare to break the enemy's resistance once and for all. Like Dorn, the Wardens prefer fighting across blasted ground than through turbulent skies, but when the mission calls for it, they deploy gunships in pursuit of specific objectives, utilizing their aircraft with all the discipline and skill for which the Sons of Dorn are known. Yet patience is perhaps the 9th Company's chief weapon, more cherished than any asset to be found in the chapter's armory. The timing of the shot, after all, matters just as much as its placement, lest a glimmer of exposed weakness be lost behind restored shields, or the firer be cheated of his kill by the battle's flow. Thus it is not unknown for the 9th Company's positions to go utterly silent for extended periods, only to erupt with uncompromising fury when the opportune moment arrives. Such judicious restraint by the Wardens has been the salvation of many Imperial worlds, and doubtless many more to come. The 8th Company, Dorn's Huskarls. There is one company where the Imperial Fists' otherwise immutable tenets of discipline give ground to more aggressive, impulsive strategies, grudgingly excused as necessary for the purging of youth and inexperience. As wild as these impulses appear to the Imperial Fists, to outsiders, the 8th appear only marginally less stiff-necked than the rest of the chapter. To trace the origins of the 8th Company's unusually impulsive behavior, one must delve back in time to the era known as the War of the Beast, and to the rebuilding of the chapter thereafter. To all outside the Imperial Fist, this event is unknown, but within the chapter it is a story told still. At a time of incredible peril, after immense sacrifice, the Imperial Fists were on the brink of extinction. In response, their successor chapters, recognizing that within their armor beat the hearts of Sons of Dorn, seconded battle brothers from their own ranks to restore the first founding chapter to full strength. These men were sworn to observe the traditions of the Imperial Fists over their own, but the oath was seldom obeyed entirely. A Space Marine's nature is burned into him by indoctrination and by training, and such things are not easily set aside. Such was the case with Hellbrand Alderic, formerly of the Black Templars, who saw to the rebuilding of the 8th Company. Though sprung from the same stock as the Imperial Fists, the Black Templars were ever hotter-blooded than other Sons of Dorn. The doctrines Alderic laid down reflected this, focusing on headlong assaults over the balanced coast support tactics of assault squads, bikes and skimmers. Now thick with former Black Templars whose old habits died hard, the restored 8th Company took readily to Alderic's methods. Before Chapter Master Maximus Thane could rectify the situation, the Imperial Fists were scattered across the galaxy, confronting rebellions arising in the wake of the deposing of Drakon Vangorich. It was in such conflicts that the 8th Company was truly reborn to war, earning battle honours across the Segmentum Obscurus. Amongst these were many campaigns under the notional command of Wolf Lord Harald Firetooth, whose Fenrisian bravado only encouraged Alderic's aggressive approach. It is said by the time the 8th Company returned to Phalanx, they were all but unrecognizable as Imperial Fists. Such is surely exaggeration, but it is known that the company suffered censure from the Chapter Master. However, when Thane wrathfully divided the 8th's battle brothers between the other active companies, he noted that rather than carry Alderic's impetuous ardour with them, they ever after displayed discipline that put even the most stoic to shame. It was as if by allowing their aggression to run unfettered, they had purged that part of themselves, and emerged all the stronger for it. Thus was Alderic, who had faced censure for his mishandled leadership, restored command, and the logistics of the chapter reshaped to ensure battle brothers who ascended from the ranks of the Scout Company would first progress to the 8th, in order to excise their youthful wildness. The tradition continues to this day, far from honing the combined close support tactics Thane once desired. The modern 8th Company still favours a spearhead of assault troops. Bikes are employed as a means to bring battle brothers blade to blade with the foe, rather than for the purpose of mobile fire support. The origins of this change to the chapter's practices are immortalized on many company banners. A golden figure bearing Alderic's original cruciform-hilted sword portrayed alongside representations of Harald Firetooth's personal sigil. The story might also be told by the epithet Dorn's Huskarls. While many believe it refers solely to the Primarch's bodyguard of days long gone, some say it honours kinship with the Huskarls of Russ. The 7th Company, the Guardians of Phalanx. The 7th Company are charged with the defending of Phalanx. None know the layered defences of its halls as well as they, nor guard them as jealously. In them there is a reverence for the ageless machine normally observed only in the chapter's tech marines. So important is the bond between the 7th Company and Phalanx that when a captain ascends to the company's command, his primary heart is ritually removed and replaced with an augmetic device crafted from the battle station's own components. This transfer of flesh serves to remind the captain of his new struck bond. The augmetic heart is considered heavier than the one it replaces and causes an ever-present pressure in his chest. Towards the end of the 41st millennium, when Phalanx was almost destroyed twice, once at the hands of the demon prince Be'lakor, and again during the war for doomed Cadia, the 7th Company lamented that duty had called them elsewhere so that they were not present for such conflicts. Indeed, so struck by prideful guilt was Gregor Decian, then captain of the 7th, that when the Great Rift manifested, he and his company embarked on a penance crusade to its leading edge. Decian and the 7th suffered great trials on worlds writhing with demonic corruption, beset by rebellion and enslaved by heretic Astartes, but were left stronger for it. All for the best, as Decian would soon after be called upon to succeed Vorn Hagen as chapter master following the latter's death in Terra's defense. Decian now rules the Imperial Fists, and Phalanx has been restored to a level of magnificence not seen for millennia, thanks to a secret technology provided by the Adeptus Custodes, and once again sails the stars, a symbol of hope to the Imperium and doom to its enemies. Determined that the battle station should never again be so humbled, but loath to perpetually commit an entire company to defend against an attack that might never arise, Decian authorized Captain Talos to expand the ranks of Phalanx's standing guard, the Auric Auxilia. This Talos has done with characteristic gusto. Once the Auric Auxilia drew solely from aspirants not quite deemed worthy of the Primarch's gene seed, its ranks now include several thousand drawn from the Cadian diaspora, who offer service in exchange for a debt to Phalanx that can never be repaid. It is a practice not without its controversy, placing as it does more military might in the hands of a Space Marine chapter. To date, Guilliman appears swayed by the argument that those wars that cannot be won through Phalanx's might alone will be hardly swayed by a few thousand extra guardsmen. Moreover, Decian's decree appeared to be paying off. Though Phalanx is seldom wholly without battle brothers of the 7th Company, the remainder of the company's warriors now campaign for the Imperium once more, their ancient charge secure under the watchful eye of an irascible Praetor Colonel Talia Kask. The former Astra Militarum officer has also a second duty, entrusted to her in secret by Talos. The captain seeks to know why the Custodes so freely gave over their hidden treasures, and what the answers to that dark question might imply. It is Kask's secret purpose to investigate these matters and report her findings to Talos alone. On the surface, the extended duties of the 7th Company are not so different from those of the 6th, based as they both are around the methodical slaughter of aggressors. But in actuality, there is much to divide the two. The 6th favour static positions, backed by overwhelming firepower, while the 7th draw heavily from the chapter's reserves of land speeders, repulsors and transport vehicles, adopting a much more flexible battle stance. It would be impractical to defend Phalanx any other way, for its passengers are many and its approaches labyrinthine. Perhaps at the height of the Imperial Fist's glory, they could have relied upon sufficient warriors to hold its halls as they would a fortress's walls. In the era Indomitus, such dreams are folly. Any who seek to defend Phalanx must be adaptable in the extreme, utilizing a mobile defense to catch the foe off guard, a methodology that translates well to planetary campaigns whenever the 7th Company deploys as one. So, before the daylight fully crested the horizon, it began again. This time, a number of cultists that must have been near 70% of those that remained were now readied and presenting themselves behind their makeshift and motley banners. Space Marines were amongst them, but very few. Apostles for the main part, but they were a drop in this vast ocean of gibbering, screaming and seething mass. Just something to make sure the cultists actually made it to the walls, perhaps. There was much rage, but also a touch of desperation in the cavorting and taunting coming from the Chaos Cultist lines. Without a set of 3 moats in their way, there was little that the Imperial Fists would be able to do to stop them getting to the very walls of the fortress named Conqueror's Ruin. And this one fact made the cultists move with a relish they did not have the days before, for they felt that they would actually take this place. It would be the first time they gained the ground and touched the walls, but all present, all amongst that horde, felt that in this one attempt they would be victorious. On this first attempt they would swarm the walls, dragging the Marines down by weight of bodies alone. Then they would just jump down and rampage through the old camp. They only needed to get over the walls. With the numbers they had, it would be inevitable. As they charged, they headed in 2 directions, left and right. There was initially no central path of force, as the walls were breachable, but in the center of the fortified line there was an opening into the bunker complex. But before it stood a field of energy that could not be penetrated by all of the force the traitor Marines could hit it with the days preceding. Hence it was deemed impossible. The traitor Marines did not tell their cultist thralls, so the very area may be used as a sally point from which the Imperial Fists could attack out with impunity. A massive horn resounded across the entire valley, soon to be met with 100 of its kind and, only seconds later, by the clamorous roar of the throng of scum as they stampeded like a herd of deranged oxen. The only difference was that natural animals always stampede from, whereas these animals were definitely stampeding toward. The fortress actually shuddered under the force of the mass-charging feet, but none inside moved a muscle. None even so much as flinched. For they were Imperial Fists, and they were born for this. There were no calls for volley fire, as no trickery or morale issues would prevent this amount of momentum. Nothing would stop them from reaching the walls. But getting over them? That was another thing altogether. The lines of Marines all fired as swiftly as they could, as economical with their movements as before. Yet this time, 1 in 5 men was tasked with a different goal. As these men, the best shots in their units, all took to hunting and executing the power-armoured traitor Marines amongst this wave. The apostles and others died to a man, so that when the rabble got to the walls, they slammed up against it and actually began to crush each other. Ladders were raised and grappling hooks were fired up across the entire front, and the avalanche of scum attempted to get up these hooks and ladders in such numbers and at such speed that they could never all be thrown back by so few warriors, Astartes or no. With an eye to his stocks and a knowledge of warfare built over decades in action, the lieutenant then barked an order down his vox into the helmets of the sergeants in charge.
Sergeants, initiate ammo conservation. Hold the line.
Ammo conservation drill. Sling bolters. Prepare to engage in melee.
The men did as instructed, as if one man in many bodies. They all stepped back and stowed their bolters, and then stepped back to the fore. And as they stood, they held back the cultists so effectively that none who were not present would believe it. The Imperial Fists are known for their accuracy, for the bolter drills, but they are Astartes, Space Marines, the Emperor's own angels of death. And by the Holy Throne did they prove it this day. For as the cultists would reach the top of their ladders or ropes, they would be bodily hauled up by the Imperial Fists, only to be thrown from the walls like missiles, often smashing scores of their comrades from the ladders. The Imperial Fists Primarch were slightly more grandiose with their strength, more able to bodily lift the cultists over their heads before dashing them down, but they were matched by the experience and economy of the firstborn tactical Marines. These Marines would grab a cultist by its head and slam a knife through its chin and into its brain, stopping all struggling instantly. For the older Astartes to more shove them down, but with more control and accuracy than those hurled down by the Primarch. And this went on for most of the morning. Everyone knew it would be a matter of endurance, up to a point, but that the leadership of the Loyalist Marines were more than aware that they needed to conserve their bolter ammunition for the real threat, the real battle against the tainted traitor Marines. But could they last? As the hours ticked past, the hopes of the cultists were occasionally answered, and 1 or 2 of the Marines were indeed pulled down by weight of numbers alone. But they were few, and in those situations where there was a temporary gap in the line, the cultists did not gain their easy rampage as they had hoped. For those who attempted to jump from the walls were met with hard bunkers, forming another entire construction within the lands between the walls and the fortress proper, and when they attempted to charge across the tops of these bunkers, auto-sentries whirred into life and tore them to pieces.
Lower the shields. My men need a warm-up before the real filth arrive. Lower the shields.
Within the base, behind the shields in a large entryway, Sergeant Shoran Kulm stood amongst his hand-picked men, the Marines of the Slaughter Yard, as they had been dubbed, a nickname that they more than deserved. 2 lines of them stood calm and impassive, as they had for multiple days now, always ready, but never yet unleashed. The back rank was a full mixed score of Centurion power suits, half with heavy and assault bolters, with each alternate Centurion being armed with siege drills. The front rank was made up of an equal number of aggressors in their Mark 10 Gravis armor. 1 in 3 was equipped with Flamestorm gauntlets, the rest with Bolterstorm, the preferred array of the Imperial Fists. But all of the front rank had dual power fists from which these ranged weapons were attached. And Sergeant Culm was right. His Centurions were piloted by veterans and could wait for weeks stock still in one place if required. But his aggressors? His young Primaris warriors were gnashing at the bit to get involved, a feeling that could overwhelm them on their activation if it was not sated or at least slacked soon. And they could not afford to make mistakes. At this, Lieutenant Markov listened to his commanding officer for a second, and then turned to scan the battlements again. Culm knew what he was doing. Time to break this wave here, and now.
I think they've nearly had enough. Let's force them in to see Sergeant Culm, shall we? Clear the bulwarks. Grenades at the ready. Give the order when I lower my hand.
Grenades at the ready. Odds mid-distance, evens far. Special and heavy weapons Marines close.
On my mark.
Execute on my mark.
Mark!
Mark!
At this, the Marines, both tactical and intercessor, all threw their grenades with well-honed accuracy and discipline. And not just one. Each time the sergeant dropped his hand, another wave of them was meticulously and perfectly placed. Explosions went off at every depth of the tight-packed mass below the walls. It was utter and total carnage. The furthest grades were always positioned just behind the last ranks of the sieging scum, so as to make them back towards the walls, herding them as they had before the moats exploded and ended the previous wave.
Aye, sir. Alright, my lads. The captain has given us his blessing. When that shield comes down, an avalanche of scum will be coming through those doors. I want clean, crisp kills. This is just an aperitif, so no grandstanding, no pushing forward. Every last one of us will be needed when they send in the warp spawn and the traitors. We break this tidal wave right here, right now. Control. Shields down on my mark. Mark.
As the masses tried to escape the hail of death from above, the shields of the front of the Bastille flickered off. When they went down, there was suddenly a place for the masses to run to avoid the punishing grenades, the rain of death. And thus, they funneled into the prepared slaughter yard in their hundreds.
Hold. Hold. Hold! Fire!
The cultists were almost at the Imperial Fist lines, so close, when they finally opened up. The flamers of the aggressors charring the front ranks in swathes. As the bolt-storm gauntlets of the aggressors and the heavy bolters of the Centurions cycled so quickly that they soon began to glow and smoke with the exertion. A deluge of fire burst from them, and all to their fore were torn to pieces. Yet as the grenade hail of death continued outside, more and more of them were pushed into the meat grinder that was the slaughter yard. At last, only twitching beds of bodies remained below the city walls and in the yard. There were no more cultists left active from all the thousands that had been thrown at the walls. The 6th Company, the Siege Hammers. For all Rogal Dorn's belief in the Bastion Imperialis, he knew that even the strongest of walls were nothing without righteous warriors upon their ramparts. Such wisdom echoes down the centuries, forming the adamantium core of the 6th Company's mission. The mission of the Adeptus Astartes is one of lightning war, to overwhelm the foe's defences and leave nothing but broken dreams in their wake. Yet the anarchy of battle seldom allows warriors to fight entirely in the manner of their choosing. No matter how well laid the plan or how disciplined one's comrades, there comes a time when the tide turns and attackers are forced on the defensive. Dorn understood this well, having seen the advances of the Great Crusade undone and Terra itself placed under siege, and when his legion was broken into chapters, he ensured that one full company would master the arts of siegecraft from upon the battlements rather than before them, ensuring that should the Imperial Fists ever find themselves on the defensive, they would know triumph. Thus was the foundation of the Imperial Fists 6th Company laid down, born on the shoulders of those who had excelled in the grim trench warfare of the Iron Cage, that great and bloody conflict in the immediate aftermath of the Horus Heresy, between the Imperial Fist Legion and those who are their twisted reflection, the Iron Warriors. The newly formed 6th Company embraced all the lessons unintentionally taught by jealous Perturabo and his Iron Warriors, buttressing an already accomplished understanding of siegecraft with the grim science of defense. If the stern eye of Dorn was not motivation enough, the hope of one day visiting ruin on the traitors of Mendigard with doctrines of their own devising was a spur to greatness. Such ruin has yet to be delivered, but the traditions of the 6th continue. As one of the chapter's reserve battle line companies, the Siege Hammers are responsible for a significant proportion of every Battle Brothers training, ensuring that in times of need, all Imperial Fists can fall back on the lessons learnt in the company. Indeed, those who remain permanently with the Siege Hammers as sergeants only grow more accomplished in their bloody trade, the specialized wisdom coming to the fore whenever battle must be endured from behind fortress walls. There is no defensive position the steely-eyed sergeants of the 6th cannot improve upon, and it is a rare captain who does not form his battle plans around a core of these officers' devising. As the Imperial Fists prosecute their wars in the era Indomitus, 6th Company squads accompany a high proportion of strike forces, tasked with securing sites of strategic importance as the campaign rages on. Indeed, at Zalto 5, a world in open rebellion, Intercessor Squad Pharaon oversaw the construction and defense of a rampart complex that stretched for a league between the main landing fields and the volcanic foothills. So lethal were the layered defenses and automated kill zones built into that lonely stretch of rampart that those few Battle Brothers held their ground with no aid save from the servitors responsible for its construction. For nearly a week, Idolatrix Sarasta spent the lives of her blood-drunk cultists against the wall until its fall became a total obsession. Sarasta took the rampart at the last, slaughtering all but one of the Battle Brothers who had stymied her advance. But by then, the Zaltoic heresy was all but crushed, the regiments of Astra Militarum who had declared for the Idolatrix obliterated by the 4th Company's pinpoint strikes, and her hordes of cultists exhausted by the indomitable warriors of the 6th. In support of its defensive duties, the 6th Company draws heavily from the chapter armory, supplementing its infantry-borne heavy weapons with thunderfire cannons, dreadnoughts and artillery tanks. When assembled en masse, the Siege Hammers' preferred battle formations are often mistaken by chroniclers for those of the 9th Company, so overwhelming is their output of fire. Indeed, Captain Antaros has many times boasted that his mere reserve battle company will match the Knight's fury any day, a claim that never fails to rouse Captain Charon's ire. The 5th Company, the Heralds of Truth. For the Heralds of Truth was an ideological contest as much as it is a test of might. misdirection and subterfuge they disdain as unfitting tools for a righteous warrior, and meet every contest head-on, no matter if circumspection might have better served the Emperor's cause. The Heralds of Truth are responsible for preserving the Scriptum Ascender, the great archive of Rogal Dorn's commentary on the Great Crusade, the heresy, and the scouring that followed. Dorn was famously direct in his manner of speech, and there is little doubt that his uncompromising view of the galaxy as a whole, and the Imperium in particular, would be nothing short of shockingly enlightening to modern scholars. However, no scholar has ever been permitted to roam the archive's corridor. Only the 5th Company's senior officers and chosen members of the Reclusium and Librarius are permitted access. Alas, the truths contained therein are fractured and fleeting, their secrets slipping away as tech adepts labour to maintain Phalanx's venerable functions. What remains are snippets and snatchings of once encyclopedic journals. Dorn's great military schema and predictions of the unfolding millennia now reduced to little more than garbled prophecy. Still, the 5th Company endeavours to see that Dorn's voice remains heard in the Imperial Fists' dealings. As Keeper of the Archive, its captain holds a unique position on the Chapter Council, and his voice carries further in matters of strategy and doctrine than his rank might suggest. It is telling that in 10 millennia of chapter history, more chapter masters have been appointed directly after leading the 5th Company than those from all other companies combined. On campaign, the Heralds of Truth deploy with grim procession and heraldic panoply, bearing banners and company relics from the days of the Legion. Gothic script proclaims the lineage of every squad and battle tank, their deeds, their triumphs, and the roster of the slain. For one truth decreed by the 5th stands out as preeminent, that even the lowliest and most wretched of men can be raised to heroism if they are but given inspiration. It is the company's sacred duty to ensure that those liberated by the Imperial Fists are left in no doubt as to who is responsible. Proud banners are raised on fortifications and battlements, and statues stuck from stone to mark battles hard won. Thus do Rogal Dorn and the Emperor claim new victories 10,000 years after either last trod the contested dirt of far-flung worlds, and long-sundered populaces learn their names and legends anew. The 4th Company, the victors of Brax. Even in a chapter renowned for its siegecraft, the Battle Brothers of the 4th Company have earned great distinction as fortress breakers. Seeing subtlety as prevarication, they seek victory through direct means, crushing the foe amidst the roar of Land Raider engines and the pulverizing tread of warsuits. When the Alpha Legion provoked an uprising on the fortress world of Brax, the Imperium's initial response ended in disaster. While internecine warfare raged from bastion to bastion, the Alpha Legion played no role on the shifting battlefronts. Instead, they focused their efforts on the secret seizure of Brax's Skyfire arrays and waited for the inevitable planet strike. Unaware of the trap, Lord General Praeculus ordered a full-scale assault as soon as the punitive fleet arrived in orbit. In the slaughter that followed, Praeculus lost a Titan Legion, 6 Astra Militarum regiments, and no small quantity of auxiliary assets, without ever claiming more than a kilometre of Brax's bunker complexes. By the time the Imperial Fists' 4th Company arrived, diverted from the Mangora battle zone, Praeculus had already requested authority to commence exterminatus. For the 4th Company's captain, Lidoro, such measures halted just shy of heresy. The Imperial Fists had claimed Brax from the darkness of the Noctis Eterna but a decade earlier, and the fortress world had become a linchpin in the Bastion Imperialis Reborn. Ignoring Praeculus's bluster with customary stoicism, Lidoro wasted no time in launching a planet strike of his own, one that would reverse the Imperium's fortunes. It began with a punishing orbital strike on the northern continent's Skyfire complex, Brax Ultima. A drop zone assault at demi-company strength followed before the thunder of the bombardment had echoed away. Outnumbered a dozen times over, the Imperial Fist suffered horrendous casualties, and Lidoro himself lost both an arm and an eye in the intense fighting. But thanks to the Imperial Fist's dogged determination, the Alpha Legion were driven back into Brax Ultima's sprawling Aegis defense lines, long enough for Lidoro to seize control of the Skyfire complex and unleash his true assault. Not for nothing did Alar's Lidoro carry the title of Master Armorer. Ahead of the battle, He had commandeered every uncommitted suit of Centurion and Gravis armour for the 4th Company, and every land raider that could be spared. Scarcely had the sky above Brack's Ultima gone dark when the remainder of the company roared into battle aboard gunships of every stripe. This gold fist crushed the Alpha Legion counter-assault before the wounded Lydoro's position could be overrun, and thereafter ground its way through the trenched lines towards the neighbouring complex of Brack's Proxima, their advance as remorseless as the unfolding of history. By the time Brack's Resplendor fell 3 days later, elements of the stymied relief army defied the callow Preculus and threw their support behind the 4th Company. Only then, with the big guns of the Astra Militarum's heavy artillery hammering out a hymn of inevitable victory, did Lydoro give himself over to the care of his apothecaries. The conquest reshaped the 4th Company's identity, not least with their new moniker, the Victors of Brax, which the Chapter Council decreed would ever after celebrate their fearless dedication to the Bastion Imperialis. As the Indomitus Crusade unfolds, and the company fights as an unstoppable, pulverizing fist, its forces bolstered by the armoured warsuits and battle tanks that filled Brax's Aegis lines with traitor blood, as well as the wondrous Repulsor and Repulsor Executioner graphitic tanks the Dorn would surely have admired. What the victors of Brax lack in speed, they more than compensate for in sheer, intractable mass. Though their attacks may seem relatively slow and grinding, it is often the case that they leave behind no trace of those foolish enough to be caught in their path. Captain Alars Lydoro leads them still, an augmetic arm and eye replacing those lost in his hour of triumph. It is rumoured that this eye's gaze is ever drawn to the Iron Warrior's stronghold on the demon world of Medrengard, the destruction of which would be the ultimate challenge for the ultimate siege breakers. The 3rd Company perhaps best represents the tenacity of the Imperial Fists, but also reveals the cost of the chapter's unflagging resolve. The Sentinels of Terror have on many occasions been reduced to the barest handful of battle brothers, only to claw themselves back from the abyss through adherence to the precepts the Imperial Fists hold most dear. It has long been a credo of the chapter that blood spent in battle is an offering made to the Emperor. If such is true, then there are none higher in the Emperor's sight than the Sentinels of Terror. Despite suffering punishing casualties in the final years of the 41st millennium, the Imperial Fist's 3rd Company never fails to rise anew, stronger and deadlier than before. Indeed, Chapter Master Vorn Hagen was known to refer to the 3rd Company as a single entity of war that slews off its weakness in the maelstrom of battle, like a serpent rubbing its belly upon rock to divest itself of old scales. In a chapter known for its inflexible ways, the 3rd Company are unusually adaptable to circumstance, often disdained by other Sons of Dorn for possessing a martial stance more suited to the Ultramarines. If such is meant in insult, the Sentinels of Terror bear it proudly, content that their roster of victory speaks for them thunderously. Such is the attritive nature of the 3rd Company's battles that their ranks more than any other have seen aggressive reinforcement. The need to keep the Sentinels of Terror at fighting strength has been so great at times that the usual progression between companies has been overridden. Space Marines from every reserve company, and even especially promising neophytes undergoing final transformation, have all transferred directly to the 3rd Company. Such has become merely another reason to cast askance gazes at the 3rd. Yet here, the company's adaptability again proves its worth. As part of the rites of induction into the company, new battle brothers must spar with one of the Sentinel sergeants in Phalanx's dueling rings. Fluidly adjusting their fighting style, the experienced sergeant will quickly pitch the inductee from their feet. Bruises and broken bones are quickly mended, but serve as swift eliminators of pride, forging strong bonds of brotherhood. Undying hatred burns in the Sentinels' hearts for the Iron Warrior warsmith Shon-Tu. On many occasions have they pursued this foe, only for him to slip out of their grasp even when they thought his wounds were beyond recovery. Shon-Tu has instigated Tyranid incursions and Orc predations, and is responsible for the death of hundreds of Imperial Fists. His head is eagerly sought by the 3rd Company, and will be theirs in time. The Sentinels continue to serve as only they can. spearheading the assault when the bluntness of the First Company or the flagellatory zeal of the Second would bring problems of their own. With each battle won or lost, they edge closer to perfection, to the epitome of what it means to be not only an Imperial Fist, but a member of the Adeptus Astartes. Whether they will ever reach that hallowed state, or perish striving for it, remains to be seen, but their road will surely be one of honour. The Second Company, the Scions of Redemption. The Second Company are the custodians of the chapter's collective guilt, fighting ever to make amends for failure past. Thus the name Scions of Redemption is no figurative title. Their search for atonement colours the company's every action, both on and off the field of battle, and will never cease. The Imperial Fists hold a reputation for the aggressive pursuit of penance for even the slightest failures. Rogal Dorn's belief that pain burns away impurity and brings necessary clarity is enshrined within the chapter's oldest rituals, most notable in the use of the pain glove, a horrific web of electrofibers designed to stimulate nerve endings and hold the wearer fully conscious while his body burns in simulated fire. Nowhere in the Imperial Fist chapter is Dorn's legacy of purity through pain observed more passionately than in the Second Company. Though Imperial records are at best mixed on the topic, it is traditionally held that it was the Second Company's failure that led to the chapter's near annihilation during the era known as the Rise of the Beast. A dismal day that left but a single Imperial Fist standing, and the chapter's future reliant on reconstitution from its successors. Every failure since, no matter how small, is considered a throwback to those dark times, as if the Second Company itself is somehow cursed with weakness. And such weakness can, of course, only be excised through pain. In another chapter, the Second Company would perhaps be purged, its battle honours struck and a new unsullied tradition begun. But the Imperial Fists are nothing if not shaped by their history. And over time, the Second Company has come to represent something more than its own failures. Tolerating the open wound of the company's presence has in many ways become the chapter's own penance, a burden borne for inadequacies past. In turn, the brothers of the Second, even the newcome Primaris, who can hardly be held culpable for the failures of old, bear that penance alongside their own, mortifying flesh and fallible spirit in the pain glove's grasp. This obsession has led to the Second Company adopting the most methodical of battle tactics, for they are determined not to invoke further dishonour through rash behaviour. Thus do they advance in a mechanical manner, perhaps more fitting to the robotic maniples of the Adeptus Mechanicus than the Adeptus Astartes, with transport-mounted squads and bikers performing vanguard reconnaissance, while the Second Company's main body advances, bolt rifles roaring a penitent hymn. Yet service in the Second is certainly not considered dishonourable or shameful. On the contrary, there is no nobler cause than to bear the collective sins of one's brothers, however inflated by ritual and collective guilt those sins might be, and to seek atonement for them. Thus the Second Company fight with a cold fury surpassing even that of their comrades, determined to restore not only an honour lost in ages past, but to sustain that of all those they call brothers. The First Company, the Emperor's Shield. The First Company have borne many names over the millennia, each reflecting the chapter's wider duties at the time. In the days of the Dark Imperium, they use a title that represents their inviolable mission, to make Terra the central citadel of an unbreachable fortress. That it also serves to remind Guilliman of the Imperial Fist's finest hour is likely no coincidence. As the Imperial Fist's veteran company, the warriors of the First carry out both the heaviest of combat duties and the oldest ceremonial roles. They are the chapter's thunderbolt, striking from troubled skies to deliver the Emperor's light where it is needed most. In keeping with the Imperial Fist's affinity for siegecraft, they have long been known to deploy in tactical dreadnought armour, favouring the bluntest of weapons from an arsenal scarcely known for its subtlety. Thunderhammers, cyclone missile launchers, and chain fists are commonly utilised, the better to breach any fortifications in the company's path. Such has ever been the Imperial Fist's way, to strike where the enemy is strongest, and hammer humiliation upon their broken bodies. However, in recent years, the First Company has displayed a tactical flexibility seldom seen in the annals of the Imperial Fists. The credit for this can most readily be laid at the feet of its captain, Darnath Lysander, a rare son of Dorn who has come through the crucible of pride and humility with lessons learned. Lysander's long tenure as a commander of the First has seen the company undertake a more flexible battlefield stance. Lighter and nimbler marks of armor are deployed as a scalpel, where the hammer of Terminator assault is wasteful or inefficient. Where before the First would overrun an enemy position and leave the task of securing vital ground and winnowing out the last defenders to other companies or Astra Militarum regiments, now they as often detail veterans from their own ranks to assume these duties. How long such doctrines will survive Lysander's elevation or death remains to be seen. Stubbornness and the drive for glory is in the Imperial Fist's blood, and few of Lysander's potential successors have learned the lessons that a warrior's duties take many forms. When the fires of war ebb and rare moments of repose are offered, the First Company serves as guardians of the chapter's relics, much as their predecessors in the Old Legion once did. Each arena aboard Phalanx is maintained under the watchful gaze of a veteran sergeant and his squad, as are the artifacts stasis-locked within. Indeed, many veteran squads of the First abandoned their own name upon attaining the lauded rank, adopting instead the name of their dueling arena's foremost battle honor. Should that sergeant earn promotion to elsewhere in the chapter, he leaves that name behind. Thus, when Aeneas Roma left the First to become captain of the VIIth, he was no longer entitled to bear the fabled Roma battle honor as his name, and became Aeneas Strom once more. Such tradition forms a deep honor brethren within the chapter. When a strike force's commander calls upon aid from the First Company, he is certain to request those marked as his brethren by their battle honors. The Imperial Fists Armory. Deep in the bowels of Phalanx, sealed behind towering gates whose bas-reliefs commemorate the first meeting of Rogal Dorn and the Emperor, sits the Imperial Fists Armory. It is here that the chapter's weapons and armor are repaired after every battle, and ready to serve anew in an epoch of endless war. Phalanx's armory is a source of great pride for the Imperial Fists, but with the majority of its once full chambers standing empty, it also serves as a sad reminder of losses millennia past. As inheritors of the 7th Legion, the Fists have the honor to bear into battle some of the oldest and most revered relics in the entire Imperium. Armor, weaponry, and even a number of battle tanks that trace their origins back to the days of the Great Crusade. With their ailing mechanisms placated by diligent tech marines, and their war wounds soothed by unfeeling servitors, such relics serve as well in the era Indomitus as they did upon their first forging. Alas, this great trove survives as but a fraction of its former glory. Many irreplaceable treasures were lost in the chapter's near annihilation during the rise of the beast, though their function was soon replaced by new armaments provided by toiling forge worlds. The spiritual loss echoed through the centuries. Even today, a handful of the chapter's tech marines scour the galaxy for fragments of the armory's history, stolen away by green-skinned pirates and tinkerers. It is a forlorn search, for the loss was suffered thousands of years in the past, and few reclamations are achieved. A rare example is the cowl plate of Captain Kurland's command rhino, unearthed from the junk pile of an orc warboss in the Charadon sector during the dying days of Millennia 41. Retrieving this relic cost the chapter 20 lives, but all considered the loss worthy of the trade. The armory stretches as far as the eye can see, rank upon rank of armored vehicles and imposing warsuits awaiting their next war. Thousands of robotic servitors and tool-wielding chapter serfs work there constantly, the cacophony of their servo arms, plasma cutters and blowtorches dominating the corridors day and night. Diminished though the armory is in the eyes of the Imperial Fists, it remains an assemblage of war material to be envied by chapters of later foundings. It is from the armory that company captains and strike force commanders requisition the heaviest weaponry the chapter can provide. Armored vehicles as uncompromisingly lethal as any found within the Imperium's bounds. Unquenchable warsuits that augment even a Space Marine's war might to new and prodigious heights. And of course, dreadnoughts. the cyborg sarcophagi of battle brothers who fight on from the precipice of death itself after sustaining terribly grievous wounds. Thus, the chapter's companies can call upon the armory to supplement their traditional strengths or compensate for their weaknesses. Befitting the Imperial Fists' chosen way of war, more requisitions focus on enhanced raw firepower. This is especially true of the battle companies, whose captains often feel the need to supplement the 2 fire support squads under their command with formidable assets from the armory, the better to conduct campaigns in the storied name of Rogal Dorn. Vindicators, predators and repulsors are seldom out of service, withdrawn only to salve the worst of their war injuries, and Centurion warsuits have become so closely associated with certain companies that there is some doubt as to whether they fall any longer under the Master of the Forge's jurisdiction. Glorious redemption. Even in victory, the Sons of Dorn tend towards an almost masochistic self-flagellation in thought and deed, determined that their next effort shall not be judged wanting. Thus many vehicles bear names exhorting battle brothers to greater effort: Absolution, Primarch's Endeavour, and Glorious Redemption. This predator was well named, for it played a key role in the Third Company's penitent crusade of Thunder in late Millennium 41, fighting with distinction against the Tyranids on Drashin. And so, to sum up, most ask, what can my Emperor, my God, do for me? Will he save me? Will he guide me? Will he raise me up? Will he protect me? For the populace of the Imperium believe the Emperor to be a deity, so the relationship is expected to be reciprocal. I have prayed to you. I have served you. I have sacrificed to you. What will be my reward, either now or in the time when I have passed into your protection, when I stand at your side? Not so for the many sons of Rogal. The Imperial Fists do not ask what the Emperor can do for them. They ask what they can do for their Emperor. They always have, and they always will. It is pure, because it does not rely on a childlike adoration of an idealized version of the Emperor as a god. They know the Emperor is but a man, and still they serve, and they have done so for 10,000 years and more. They have suffered near extermination on multiple occasions, have fought brothers, Astartes, Primarchs, demons, and the very dark gods themselves. They have never tired, never backed down, never surrendered. All due to one word: loyalty. Not because the Emperor is a god, not because he is a legend, but because he was a man, a great man, a man who tried to defend his entire race. Because they are loyal. And as good a seneschal as Reboot Gilliman is, he should never have been left in charge. Never. For he did not serve at the Emperor's side a tenth as much as Rogal. He did not fight all of his brothers practically alone for the better part of a decade. He did not board the vengeful spirit, and he did not endure the longest second. Reboot did not hear the last spoken words of their father, the Emperor, as he lay near dying and imparting all he could to his most loyal son, his framework for the survival of humanity. Nor did he, Gulliman, drive the traitor legions to the Eye of Terror with fire and wrath. And if Reboot had not performed a bloodless coup while his brothers were fighting the traitors, if Rogal had been in charge of the Imperium, then the Bastion Imperialis would have been enacted, instead of the avalanche of bureaucracy that has choked the Imperium for all of its existence. My perspective only, as it makes things more fun. But you can come up with your own theory. Hit the comments and share. What should have happened? What would have happened? What would the Imperium be like if it were forged in the image of Rogal, or not Reboot? But now, let us hear the conclusion of the Siege of Conqueror's Ruin. The defenders did not have to wait so long this time. The moon rose high in the air, but it was red as blood, the clouds around it sackcloth. A wind whipped up and twisted over the major concentrations of the traitors. From there, it wound its way towards the Bastille itself. All atop it held on to whatever was sturdy, that which would not simply blow away in these gusts of wind so strong they threatened the very heavens themselves. And as the turbulent currents approached the walls of Conqueror's ruin, the mats of twisted and broken bodies beneath them twitched. The hurricane moved across the fields of dead, and an infinitesimally small red light burst from each body and was carried away on the winds as they returned to their place of origin, the traitor column. It was mere moments after the Imperial Fists had started to stand erect again, to see where the winds had sailed, when they felt it as much as heard it. Astartes, Space Marines, are resistant to the powers of the war, as are no other humans that have ever lived. And the stoic sons of Rogal Dorn, the Imperial Fists, were known to be some of their most doughty warriors. Any lesser men would have voided their bows and fled at that one echoing scream, the thunderhead that struck both the ears and the heartstrings, the very soul at the same time. The birthing cry of something unnatural, something that should not be, that had torn its way into existence. With that done, the traitor column lurched into movement. As the warriors on the walls looked on, a huge spearhead of land raiders, rhinos, and other heavy armour came on. Around them were the last of the cultists, diminished as a host, a shadow of their former might, numbering now only in the thousands, but plentiful enough to cause problems. Thus did the lieutenant confirm with his lord, his captain, then bark out his orders.
Sergeants, order the men to ignore the chaff. Special and heavy weapons, I want that armour stopped. The rest to concentrate fire on any traitors that come out of those vehicles. Only 1 in 10 sweeping the cultists. They'll head inside anyway. Won't make myself clear.
The cultists may have been at the disadvantage at night, but not so for either loyalist or traitor Space Marines, their visors providing low light and other spectra of vision. For them it made no difference. Not really. Thus when the push came, neither Marines had the advantage in vision at the least. But the difference in stock, in training, in discipline, in accuracy could not be more telling. As the column of armour lay on, the pinpoint fire of plasma cannons, missile launchers, heavy bolters, and even massed bolt of fire tore down into them. And soon the landscape was littered with burning wrecks to illuminate the now soulless bodies of the cultist dead. But the lance cannons of the Godhammer pattern land raiders of the traitors were targeted well. They had the advantage of numbers even now. At just the right time, the land raiders seemed to part, and a small group of predators brought their lance cannons to bear as well. And the combined firepower of the front lines smashed into the walls around the shield. The shield they could not destroy, but the housing was now vulnerable. The lance cannons at this range were things of terror and power, cutting through the walls second by second as the land raiders and predators barreled forward. When transports, one after another, popped under the precision fire of the Imperial Fists, they more often than not disgorged their contents of men mostly unharmed. The cultists were now little more than a distraction, as the very Marines following them were hacking them to pieces, or blasting them out of the way so they could gain clear shots up at the loyalists on the battlements. Vile traitors they may have been, but they were no less able for it, and their heavy fire up at the walls started to take a toll on the defending Marines, both tactical Marines and even the robust Primaris. Amidst the onward rush and the popping vehicles, horrors in power armour, but twisted and mutated into parodies of Astartes, moved forward, culling the cultist throng as they went. The lieutenant immediately hailed the lead sergeant of the slaughter yard.
Sergeant Colm, beware, we have a visual on possessed heading toward the main entrance. They're coming straight for you.
As the casualties of the Imperial Fists on the walls mounted, and the traitors' mid-distance firepower hove into range, Marcos stuck to the plan and ordered his men off the walls.
Heading into the tunnels now, Captain. Taking up position pattern Omega.
You heard the lieutenant. Fall back. Staggered covering fire from odd numbers to lead. Off the wall and into the tunnels.
Covering each other as instructed, down they went in giant leaping bounds, then inside their tunnels and bunkers to their designated positions. But even as they took up position, the tidal wave hit. The shielded room was assailed before any other, as it was the only point of access.
Hold! I don't care how many of them come through that door. I don't care what they look like or what they're wielding. You will hold.
The tides of cultists burst into the wall of firepower that the slaughter yard put out, cutting them to ribbons as it had before. But they were far less worried of the bolts and flames of the Marines when behind them came the horrors that were the possessed. Finally, as the last of the cultists before them fell, the possessed burst into the fray. Bounding over or under many arcs of fire, they seemed to almost appear out of nowhere on top of many of the aggressors. But the second line, those centurions with siege drills and a penchant for melee, they pushed back and tore many of the possessed off their smaller battle brothers, only for the favour to be returned in kind. The ferocity of the initial impact of the possessed had left some Imperial Fists with their faces pierced by claws or swords, even through their armour. Some torn down and then to pieces by these part demon, part Astartes nightmares. But the tide had turned, and the Imperial Fist's cold, calculated rage quickly turned the brawl back into a battle. As the tame work of the Imperial Fists easily outmatched the unthinking rage of the possessed, the fray was swift and brutal, lasting no more than 2 minutes from start to finish. With the last of the abominations terminated, a new threat revealed itself, as missiles and balls of superheated plasma began to erupt into the ranks of the Loyalists. The real Chaos Marines were finally here. Spawn mixed amongst them, but the firepower was very real.
All units fall back to secondary positions.
Walk is time, lads. Steady withdraw to the next position.
And with that, the units of the slaughter yard retreated and splintered out across the labyrinth, taking up set positions amongst the bunkers and in the many cross-sections and dead ends. The Chaos Army finally moved into the fortress. Those attempting to go over the walls and the tops of the bunkers were gunned down with such speed and finality that the traitors were forced into the tunnels almost exclusively. And there, the massacre went on all night. The main push fully moving into the citadel provoked the final formations into advance. The elite guards and chosen warriors of the Chaos Lord, a once proud chapter master, now marched away from their camp and supplies and on to the citadel. Though it had cost the lives of all of the sorcerers under their Lord's command, he did not think it too high a price to pay. For at their head was the thing that they had summoned. As soon as they were far enough forward to have committed, a wave of fire came from the citadel. Emplacements that had never been revealed, fired all along the left flank of the heavy artillery, final reserves and essential support of the traitor force, all that had been left behind. As the shells hit, they exuded a thick and heavy fog. At this signal, the air was filled with the distant rumble of landing craft. The Storm Raven gunships dipped down and hovered behind the smoke cover, then swiftly thrust back into the skies and away. All of the eyes of the traitors left behind, and all of their scopes, guns and auspex was aimed in the direction of the smoke. It was thus an incredible shock to them when all the assault came out of their right. Out of the woods, the vanguard forces under Lieutenant Artorius swept forward. They had been waiting and spotting for their brother Imperial Fists all the time of the siege, but it was now their turn. Repulsor and Executioner heavy tanks burst from the trees, firing on the targets they had been watching for days. Their firepower was accurate and devastating, tearing into the artillery and other vehicles left behind at the camp. The many infantry and specialists left behind were set upon by infiltrators and reavers, the grenades landing on campfires and inside large tents, and quickly followed up by Marines with combat knives at the ready. Sniper rounds took down any threat of concentrated resistance, as the suppressors and eradicators gave their support to their brethren. It was over in less than 10 minutes. The main body of the traitor army could do nothing but carry on. Their boats had been burned. It was do or die.
Targets neutralized. Heading for your position now, Captain.
Excellent timing, Lieutenant Artorius.
You will need me. The commanders are heading towards you now. Looks like they've got a proper demon with them.
Many thanks for the warning, Lieutenant. We shall gird ourselves for the worst.
Indeed. I don't want a promotion just yet. So last until we get there, Xandar.
Your confidence in our skill overwhelms, Nereus. See you shortly.
The two forces, if put on an open field, given the numbers and units involved, would be far from matched. But in this environment, under these circumstances, the forces of Chaos still outnumbered the Imperial Fists by at least 5-1 at the beginning of the War of the Tunnels. The Chaos Marines were once, not so very long ago, loyalists. They once bore the Aquila with pride and protected a region of space, like most chapters. Hence they were accustomed to lightning raids, decapitating strikes, displays of shock and awe. But not this. The Imperial Fists were known to be the premier legion in siege and fortification craft, despite whatever was claimed by the Iron Warriors, who turned to evil with Horus Lupercal. So even then, even during the Great Crusade, they were renowned for their defenses, their stoic tenacity. The Imperial Fists have been given the luxury of time. Time to plan, time to build, to harden, to create. And within this labyrinth of stone, they used every lesson they had learnt during the Crusade. Every lesson learnt at the Siege of Terror, the Iron Cage, and 1,000 sieges and defences since. Every lesson learned over 10,000 years of service to the Emperor of Mankind. And over the coming hours, in the darkest depths of their handmade caverns of stone, they tore their traitors to ribbons. Pit traps, sentry guns, hidden murder holes, mines, razor wire, seeming dead ends where the centurions and aggressors of the slaughter yard ran rampant, then melted into the very walls. This was possible due to the second labyrinth. The hidden doors and sliding walls, the geokinetics of the Imperial Fist librarians, their own psychers, had created. Their affinities for stone second to none. This was no Bastille, no fortress, no citadel. This place, this was a weapon of retribution. It was a pain glove. One the traitors attempted for hours to grasp, to endure, but inexorably, they were found wanting.
Position 3, holding.
Sergeant, take your men around the flanks. Pattern Delta.
Falling back to position 4. We have warp spawning the tunnels.
Activating sentry guns. Maximum output initiated. Maximum variable elevations initiated.
We're bringing them down. A few are getting in amongst us, but nothing we cannot handle.
Time to take back our hard points, lads. Advance! Go! Go! Go!
Of course, it was not always all one way.
Khorne Berserkers detected. Sector 22. Advancing quickly.
The red-clad traitor marines could not be stopped. They moved through the caverns and tunnels like a tidal wave, killing all in front of them. But alas, like a tidal wave, they could be channeled.
Vanguard squads, you know what to do.
Ready, Captain. As always. Khorne Berserkers? What rot. These aren't World Eaters or Black Legion. We'll eat them for breakfast.
Sergeant Von Ulrich of the Vanguard veterans moved as quickly as his route would allow, but find them he did. In a large intersectional room, the Vanguard veterans, the most respected firstborn close-quarters fighters in the chapter, confronted them. Bursting into the large cavern from the north, the Berserkers of Khorne charged in looking for anything, anyone to slay. On the other side of the cavern they found Von Ulrich and his men, armed with power weapons, fists, swords, claws, and more. The Vanguard veterans stood ready to meet them head to head.
Now, you worthless scum! Who dies first?
But it was then that the pincer closed, and out of the other tunnel charged a triplicity of Blade Guard veterans. The Blade Guard were huge specimens of Primaris Marines, no less experienced or lauded than their Vanguard brethren, but they were bigger and stronger, and the shields were of a scale to them. So when they slammed into the berserkers from the side, bodily bowling over many of them in the initial impact, the momentum of the berserkers' charge was broken. It was then that the Vanguard veterans strode into the melee.
For Rogal Dorn!
Working in concert, the Blade Guard blocking and taking the rage of the Cornates on their shields, while the Vanguard veterans darted around them, creating openings and hacking down berserkers. The rage of Khorne was with them, and some of the veterans and one of the Blade Guard were gutted, or their heads lopped off their shoulders. But the combination of calm skill and the increased size of the Primaris meant the berserkers were outfought and outthought.
Berserkers neutralized. Casualties sustained, but we are active.
Forward positions retaken. My lads have everything under control, so I seem to be at a loose end. On my way.
The battles on the fringes continued, but the experience, the placement, the planning, the training, and the tenacity of the Imperial Fists paid off in spades. It was a slaughter. In only one place did their defences buckle with almost no resistance. As the tunnels of the maze were filled with the echoes of the screaming and dying, one small group of the traitors made uninterrupted progress. The Chaos Lord and his chosen simply walked slowly behind the thing that forged their pathway forward. It led the way, with hands outstretched, and reality unmade and remade itself in sickening swirls of kaleidoscopic colours as they processed ever onwards. Slowly, but without trigger or trap. Attempts to engage the central thrust had met with utter failure, as the power of the demon could not be countered by the Astartes or Primaris warriors. Whenever they should have come out in the path of the group, the Marines felt a sickening lurch, and would appear far off track in a tunnel utterly unconnected with their previous location. Eventually, inevitably, the demon forced its way through reality, reshaping all the way until it came to the last line in the sand, the headquarters of the Imperial Fists defense, where their lord, the company captain, Xandar Chiros, coordinated the entire defense. As the walls to the expansive HQ seemed to melt away and to be replaced by the image of the Chaos Force, they met immediate resistance. The huge bird-like thing stepped into the room and was lit up by the impact of bolt-off rounds striking some form of mystic shield around it. Its head bobbed up and down as it walked into the command room. Following behind it were the dozen chosen warriors and the Chaos Lord himself. The being was a demon of the Lord of Change, Tzeentch, and a powerful one. The shield it maintained deflected all that was sent at it. Captain Chiros was flanked on either side by 10 Stone Guard veterans who fanned out and eyed their opposite numbers, the Chaos Chosen. At the centre, next to the captain, stood Sergeant Colm in his Gravis armour, and he took one step forward and growled at the beastly thing.
I am a son of Rogal Dorn. I am death. I am horror. I am vengeance for the Emperor!
The bird-like thing with normal arms, one holding onto a staff, seemed to raise its head and laugh. It was a horrible noise, halfway between a seagull-like repeated honk, but it had a million resonations all at once.
You think we don't have a response, you treacherous scum?
It lowered its head and took one step back, unfurling its wings aggressively when it noticed the Marines who had now walked into the room, with all of their glares directly on it.
Librarians, send these filth back to the warp!
All 5 of them wore the blue armor and psychic hood of the Librarian. They were the ones who had been allowed to rest after their Herculean labors with the defenses, been permitted to sit out the rest of the siege, all of its many waves and battles, for this moment alone. They walked forward and began to mutter and mumble. Lightning thrashed out from one of their outstretched hands and slammed into the shield of the Lord of Change. 2 more slammed their hands together and pulled them apart. The bird again made its laughing screech, but it was clear to all but it that the true target of the attack had been behind it. A chasm erupted into being in the middle of the Chosen, forcing the Chaos Lord to bound and roll to his right to avoid being engulfed in it. But many Chosen disappeared into the hole. The one that slammed closed again just as quickly, under the power of the Librarians. As the demon dueled the 5 Librarians with the warp, its shield contracted to being only personal, and then all hell broke out. Stoneguard veterans took aim and snapped shots off at their opposite numbers within a heartbeat. The Chosen were experienced as well, and took cover even as the Loyalists opened up. All the while, the Chaos Lord had eyes for only one adversary. He glared unblinkingly at Captain Chiros as he padded forward.
Now, it's just you and me, traitor!
And for his part, the captain silently drew his power sword and walked to meet him. Neither side dared interrupt this duel, either of them. So the 3 separate engagements in the one fresco played out. Lightning crashing at shields, earth moved and shaped in an effort to grasp the demon with the power of the world. The other 2 librarians standing back with books held open and chanting and building up to something. But the demon still laughed at them, seemed to be toying with them, until the promise of Sergeant Colm's challenge became a reality, and he rushed the thing head-on. Shoran Colm charged forward at full pelt, unloading his Boltstorm gauntlets into the shimmering shields of the demon. With the lightning still crashing into it, they lit up like a dazzling dawn. Colm hoped the flare would affect the demon and permit him to close. His plan worked. It worked well. As Colm reached the demon, he triumphantly performed the Power Fist-clad uppercut that would end not only its psychic shield, but knock its block clean off. Only when he swung, it was no longer there. It was 5 feet to the left. Or was it he that had shunted? Or was it the floor? Or was it the universe? Or confusion and a moment of dizziness, ensorcelled as he now was. Colm was vulnerable, and the demon struck. With a backhand swipe, the demon smashed his wand into Colm, and he flew backwards 20 feet. His armor cracking and splintering around the impact area, his fused ribcage fractured along all of his left side. Blood shot out of his mouth from internal injuries as he connected with the wall. The Librarians seemed to retaliate by increasing the power of their attacks. But it was Shoran Colm who simply pulled himself out of the war, landing upright on his feet.
Is that it? Is that all you've got?
The mystic battle between the demon and Librarian seemed to go one way then the other, as bolts of arcane power were exchanged, but in amongst them, the demon pointed its staff at the aggressor sergeant and lifted him into the air, slowly crushing him. The squealing of Colm's ever-tightening armor was only interrupted by a volley of bolt pistol shots. Lieutenant Artorius stood above the now dropped Colm and looked down at him for a split second.
Arrived in the nick of time. Had a feeling I'd have to save someone today. Prepare to eat power sword, demon scum.
With that, he then darted forward to engage the demon himself. But it saw him coming in, sweeping with its right wing and the staff. Artorius skidded below both attacks, coming under its guard. For a fleeting second, it seemed he would add yet another outrageous act of valor and skill to his burgeoning pile of honours. Alas, he did not take note of the other hand, the other wing, so concentrated on his own strike was he. As he was mid-upward leap to slam his power sword through the neck of the bird and unzip it, he was undone. The beast just moved faster, nor was it ever exactly where it appeared to be. Hence it easily evaded the sword stroke and dragged its claws down Artorius' back. The claws cut through the ceramite warplate, his armor, like it was wet paper, and the force applied meant he was now jettisoned into the floor. Artorius did not scream, did not moan or shout out, but he did not recover quickly enough either. He bounced off the floor, so hard was his impact, but as he came up, it was to the waiting direct hit of the staff. Artorius' head was cleanly smashed off his body, his limp carcass rolling to a stop in front of Sergeant Colm. Captain Chiros strode towards the Chaos Lord. Once, he had been called Thamet Harnal, an honourable man. But that was then, and this was now. And Chiros knew exactly what he had to do. He knew all depended on him. The Librarians had witnessed the whirlwind of souls as he had. They had informed Chiros that the souls would bring a being of power, but that it would require a tether, a mortal light to bind it to this world. And while that soul still lived, the demon could not be truly defeated. So it all rode on this. On him. The Chaos Lord looked as though he would attempt to circle, but Captain Chiros simply refused to play. He carried on walking directly at the Lord, all of the confidence of a trained candidate at the Feast of Blades in his every step. Some said that the Black Templars were the best swordsmen in all of the Sons of Dorn, the most fanatical, the most filled with rage. But Chiros knew this to be an exaggeration, on all fronts. He was the equal of any sword in the Templars, and the Templars merely exhibited it, wore it on their scowls and howls and charges, the rage. But this was only the selfish, obvious, grieving, unbridled rage. Chiros knew his blood, his lineage. He knew why. And he knew that in the Imperial Fists ran the same rage, but it was as their fathers. So all-consuming as to be white-cold rage. Cold as it was controlled. Always. For they, the Imperial Fists, were always in that state. That endless sense of outrage at the taking of the dream, the betrayal of a father who gave everything and asked for nothing but the labours for which his sons were designed, were born to perform. And they betrayed him. Their father, their maker, their leader, their king. And nothing would ever let an Imperial Fist forget their failure to prevent it all. And so Chiros did not walk to this Chaos Lord with trepidation or with caution, but with quietly contained joy, because for once, just this once, he would be able to unleash the rage. He would smite this Chaos Lord with all of the fury of his father, and every Imperial Fist who had ever fought under the banners of Liege, chapter or successor. For he was his father's son. And thus did Chiros sweep his power sword up into the en garde position. The Chaos Lord, drunk on power, drunk on his connection with the demon of Sinch, drunk on his own glory, drunk on the lies of invincibility whispered into his ears that made him fall in the first place. And he attacked. Moving with a speed that could only be attributed to certainty, even for an Astartes, he attacked every quarter, every elevation, and employed every style he knew, all in one frenetic explosion of hate. When the flurry was over, the traitor's sword had been expertly blocked by Chiros. Every sally almost nonchalantly slapped aside, every angle covered with the least fuss or exertion, and the last of his strikes, the hardest, ended with his sword held down on that of the captain's. They both leaned into the locked and crackling power blades, and Chiros sneered, showing his utter contempt. And both of them leaned into the lock, grinding their swords against each other in a test of strength. Then, with one fluid movement, Chiros swung his weight backwards and sidestepped so quickly that the Chaos Lord stumbled forward. As his guard dropped for less than a second while righting himself, Chiros continued his swing around and curved his sword in a perfect circle, slicing through the vertebrae of the Chaos Lord's spine, and then through his throat, and finally out the other side. As the Chaos Lord stood for one moment, then slid forward onto his knees, his head rolling forward off his body, and bouncing thrice to land next to that of Lieutenant Artorius. Justice had been done. And with that, the ending of its tether, the death of the Chaos Lord. The Lord of Change threw up his head and gave off a horrific screech that echoed around the room for minutes, even as it flickered once, then twice, then simply disappeared, banished back to whence it came. And by the morning, the last of the hunts had concluded. The entire enemy chapter had been accounted for, and they were, to a man, destroyed.
You have fought well this day, my sons. I am proud of you, and promise I shall be back amongst you soon.
the last to fall. I won't shed a tear for them to see.